Good morning. So we continue with the purpose of government intervention. We said government will intervene because there's market failure. So what are ways in which government can intervene? We talked about indirect taxes, we talked about subsidy, we talked about imposing minimum prices, imposing maximum prices. So there are other ways in which government can also still intervene to correct market failure. One of them is through regulation. We talk about regulation, we're talking about rules imposed by government to modify the activities of the price mechanism. So look at what I wrote here. I wrote regulation. It refers to a set of rules normally imposed by government that seek to modify the behavior of firms or organizations. It is widely used to control externalities. It is easy to understand and relatively cheap to enforce. Regulations are government laws. They are government rules. So you and I, we don't have any other choice because it's government that says these things. So we just have to follow. So that's why it's relatively cheap. It is easy to understand because government. Did you get it? It's government that imposes it. So we don't have any other choice. It's the government of the country. So whatever government says, we have to go through with it. So that's why it's easy to understand because there are laws. It's not just for you, not for me, it's for everyone. So we have to understand that. And it is cheap to enforce because government has a plan for it. And government knows who they have to put in position to carry out or to execute such rules or laws in case they are offenders. So what is the problem about regulation? I wrote, it is difficult for government to fix the right level of regulation to obtain the efficiency. Regulation might be too loose or too tight. It is government. Government are not economists, like I used to say. So they might make rules that are too loose, like it is easy for everybody to go past it. Or they might be too tight, so difficult for firms that they might want to leave the market. Get the point I'm saying here? Government is not an economist. Government are politicians. They are not entrepreneurs. As a result, they might lack the expertise to make rules that will be easy. They might make these rules, but these rules they make might be too loose, like it doesn't have any impact, or might be too tight, that it has really take a lot of cost or stress from firms that they don't want to even produce anymore. So that's the first point. Note, regulation becomes efficient if the economic benefit from it brings about the same amount of economic cost. But it is efficient if the cost of regulation is the same as the benefit of regulation. So if what I'm saying is that what we have to pay for regulation is equal to what we have to enjoy from regulation, then it is efficient. You get it? So regulation is rules made by government to modify the activities of the private firms or the price mechanism to correct market failure. So that's about regulation. Then the next way in which government can control market failure, we know pollution is a market failure, yes or no? So government can use trade pollution permits to control or to correct market failure from pollution, market failure of pollution. So here the use of trade pollution permits is to reduce externalities caused by pollution. Pollution is a negative externality. So for government to control it or to reduce it or to minimize it, government will come up with trade pollution permits. What is a trade pollution permit? It means government is setting a limit to the level of carbon you can emit as a firm in the industry. So government have given you a cap, the limit of what you can emit as a firm. Usually, each firm will produce, and as soon as you produce, you emit carbon, yes or no? So this carbon, when government comes up with trade pollution permit, they will ensure that the permit they give to you is below the normal carbon emitted in that industry. So for example, let's say the banking industry, let's say the oil industry, they emit carbon of 30% in the whole carbon of the economy, 30%. So if government wants to give permits to them, government might give them 25%. So that means government is allocating 25% of carbon emission to the oil industry. So that means it's below what they used to emit. So this is what they have to pay for. As soon as they exceed it, they have to pay for further. Get the point here? Government will make a limit to the level of carbon you can emit as a firm. So government does this by trade pollution permits. So each firm in the industry will have different measure or different amount of carbon that can be emitted. As soon as you exceed your limit, you have to pay further.
Why different? Why different amounts?
Yeah, it is based on what your activity. You can't compare an oil industry with like a wristwatch industry or a shoe industry. They emit different levels of carbon.
Yes.
So you have to be fair. Government has to be fair. So each limit will be okay. Let's say the shoe industry, they emit carbon of 60%. So government might give them 45% or 50%. If they have to exceed that, each firms in that industry, if they have to exceed that, they have to pay further. Is it clear now? Yes. So then the government allocates permit, like I said, the government will allocate it. Firms that successfully reduce their emission can then trade their permits with polluters. The main advantage about permits is that firms can easily decide on the amount of carbon they want to emit and at what cost. Unlike regulations you cannot decide. The cost of regulation is the cost for all. But for permits, it depends on you as a firm. You can decide not to emit carbon. Do you get the point here? Yes. Regulations, you can't find a way around it. You have to adjust your operations to it. But for carbon emission, you can adjust. You can find a way around it. So it depends on you as a firm, the level of carbon you want to emit and at what cost. So if you want to emit more carbon, you have to understand that you have to pay more. And if you want to reduce your carbon emission, it means you are going to pay less. If you think about selling your carbon pollution permit to other firms, then you have to reduce your own carbon emission. Do you get it? So it depends on you as a firm. That is why pollution permit is preferable to regulations. For regulations, you don't have any other choice. But for pollution permit, you can decide if you want to emit carbon or you don't want to emit carbon. It is on you. Is it clear? Is it clear, please?
Yes.
The next one, that is about trade pollution permit. Now we go to state provision of public goods. If public goods are not provided, it brings about market failure. Examples of public goods, we talked about road, street lights, defense, security, the police service, the court service. These are things that the price mechanism cannot provide. And these are things that are strategic to the economy. So if we don't have them available, it brings about market failure. Not that the private firm cannot produce them, they can, but at a very high price. So we that cannot afford it might not be able to enjoy it. The price mechanism do not want to provide such goods like police service, like good road, like street lighting because of the free riders. They want to provide goods and services for those who can afford it because their own main objective is profit maximization. They just want to maximize profit. So they won't be able to provide those police service. They won't be able to provide those healthcare, free healthcare. They won't be able to provide those street lights. Who's going to pay for it? So that's why government will come up. Government will intervene by providing these things. So look at what I wrote. State provision of public goods. Government provides goods that are non-excludable, non-reliable because the market mechanism won't provide them. Government does this by funding it with tax. We call them public goods because they are non-excludable, they are non-rival. It is for everyone. In as much as it's been provided, you and I can enjoy it. In as much as it's been provided, you cannot stop me from enjoying it. I cannot stop you from enjoying it. These goods are goods that the price mechanism will not provide. So government will come in to provide them. That is another way to correct market failure. And the last one here is provision of information. We are talking about asymmetric information failure, information gap. Whenever there's information gap, government can come in to intervene. But note, like I said about state provision of public goods. Public goods are provided with taxpayer money. We have to pay taxes so that government can do these things. So go to provision of information, like I said. Information failure occurs because one party to a transaction does not have the information available to take decision. There's information failure because you and I, we have a transaction, but you have more information than me. So there's an information gap, there's asymmetric information between us. So that means I might not be taking a decision that will benefit my welfare. So my decision might be too poor that I'm going to now start losing out on it. So because some people take decisions because they don't have information about them. So they might overtake, they might underestimate the benefit of a product. As a result of that, they do not want to buy that product. They might overestimate the benefit of a product. As a result of that, they buy more. So either too much or too little is a market failure. It's misallocation of resources. So for us to be able to take decisions, the right decisions, we need to understand, we need to have information. So if information is available to us, we will be able to take the right decision. That's about it. So what does government do? Government will come up. Government will come into it. They say, yeah, a government can step to provide the information itself. So government will come up with this information by providing it, by advertising. For example, I made about here, funding the campaign to let people understand the negative impact or the negative consequences of smoking. Some people might be smoking because they don't have information, they don't have access to information about the consequences of smoking. So this is a market failure. So they've taken this decision because they lack information. So government is stepping in. With government stepping in, government will fund advertising campaign to elaborate, to expatiate, to talk further about the problems, the consequences of smoking. So this is ways in which government can step in to control or to correct market failure. We started with, it's the purpose of government intervention. We talked about indirect taxes, we talked about subsidy, we talked about imposing minimum prices, we talked about imposing maximum prices. Here today, this is regulation, rules government will make to impose on private firms to correct their activity. I talked about trade pollution permits, carbon emission. Here I talked about state provision of public goods that are non-excludable, non-rivalrous, that the private or the price mechanism will not provide because we cannot afford them. And the last one is about information failure, which is government stepping in by providing us with information that we are lacking. And that's all about chapter 19. Thank you.